So, yesterday was the 1 year anniversary of the Milo at Cal riot, and I was thinking about making a video for the day, wasn't sure what I want to talk about, and then that decision was sort of made for me when on the 31st, so the day before the anniversary of the riot, a Law and Order Special Victims Unit episode came out that is basically based on what happened to me. So I heard about the episode on the day that it aired, and what I heard was here's an episode where Ann Coulter gets raped. So I was like, oh, goody, it's like Gamergate episode, part two, gonna be another hilarious disaster. So I told a friend about it. I wasn't about to watch it myself. He watched it and he came back to me and said, not only do they rape Ann Coulter, they're basically raping you. And I was like, what do you mean? The Ann Coulter character is coming to speak on a college campus, invited there by the young conservative student group on campus. She's going to give a speech. Antifa riots to shut down the speech. She's hit on the head with a pole, gets knocked out, suffers memory loss, and is also raped because it's Special Victims Unit. So, of course, we have to just have rape in there. And the imagery and the way she's kind of shown on the ground and the weapons used and the shots of the crowd and all of that, very much taken from the Milo riot at Berkeley. And of course the character is, in terms of how she acts and how she talks, like what she says, totally Ann Coulter. Her profession is much closer to Millie Weaver, who is another blonde right-wing woman who works for InfoWars, and the title of the episode is InfoWars. So it's clearly a mashup of those characters, and then the situation that the mashed up character finds herself in is basically my situation, kind of my husband's situation, my friend's situation, plus rape. That was interesting to learn, but as this episode goes along, it takes a very, very disturbing turn. So, like I said, I thought it would be similar to the Gamergate episode. So cringy misrepresentations, very unjust and unfair in the sense that they're taking inspiration from things in the real world, but they're completely accepting a totally leftist narrative that's not supported by the facts. However, in the context of the episode, taking everything that happens in the episode at face value and being true because it's what contained within that universe, the outcome is still not terrible, right? So justice is served essentially. But in this episode, even accepting all of the premises that the show puts forth, justice is completely subverted. It was shocking. It was shocking to the point that, it's bad writing. So that when that happens, that tells you how deliberate it was, right? This was a message that they wanted to get across, and they didn't care about a good plot or interesting twists or anything like that in order to get that message across. So the message is primary, and the message is really fucked up. So basically, what happens later in the episode, they very quickly find out when the Ann Coulter character, her name is Martha, right? Martha is raped by an Antifa pole, like an Antifa sign. Which of course, if that happened in real life, as I mentioned before, they tend to sharpen the points at the end of those signs. So that might have been more of a rape murder situation. And she has the DNA of one of the Antifa leader guys under her fingernails, and she picks him out of a lineup. But she has some memory loss because she was knocked unconscious, and the rape happened after she was unconscious. So she doesn't know for sure who raped her, but she does recognize this Antifa guy in the lineup. And that seems pretty open and shut. They're going to go after him, right? And then all of a sudden, the investigators decide, well, we don't really trust what this victim is saying, even though we have DNA evidence and the physical evidence that this was his property used to rape her. That's all, pretty direct. That's not really terribly circumstantial evidence. The guy had also said in advance that literally anything should be done, by any means necessary. She must be prevented from speaking. She must be stopped. Despite all of that, they decide, purely based on the fact that Martha is political, that she has a political perspective, that they should investigate some other possibilities. Maybe someone on her own side raped her, which is reminiscent of the claims after the Milo riot happened, that Breitbart orchestrated it, that Milo hired agitators and they were the ones who actually did the violence, which is that claim has been kind of memory hold because zero evidence has ever surfaced to support it. They go and start investigating, and they end up finding this identitarian type character who they say is a misogynist and all this kind of stuff. And they end up finding out that he was a big fan of this Martha character, that the night before the riot, he had met her at a bar, he had tried to hit on her, and she had rejected him. So based on that, literally just that, they now have this alternative theory that that guy stole the sign after after Martha has this encounter with the Antifa dude, gets the DNA under her fingernails. Presumably, the Antifa dude knocks her unconscious, I guess, with the sign, and then leaves the sign there. And then this right-wing guy, this identitarian guy, comes and decides in revenge for being rejected to rape her with the Antifa pole. So that's a theory based on absolutely nothing. Just based on the fact that this person could have that motivation, as could just about any other person who's kind of walking around. So that's up against the DNA evidence. But meanwhile, they're proceeding to trial against the Antifa guy. And where it takes this really, really messed up turn is the defense attorney for the Antifa guy puts the identitarian on the stand, gets him to say a bunch of awful stuff, being a racist, whatever, which doesn't really have anything in particular to do with the case. But then the prosecutor gets up and starts grilling the identitarian guy about why the court should believe him when he says that he didn't attack Martha. And he says, because I'm testifying under oath. And he says, well, that's not really good enough. That's not good enough because you're a despicable person. You have despicable beliefs. And I don't think anyone here believes you, will believe a word that comes out of your mouth because of your political views, because of your ideology. And therefore, I am requesting that the indictment be withdrawn, and I'm not going to be pursuing this case any further. This Antifa guy gets to walk free. So, yeah, that's interesting. That's very interesting. So it's basically declaring that if you're on the right, institutions will not be protecting you, which can confirm that. The police aren't going to find the person who committed a crime against you because they just can't trust anything that you tell them about what happened because you're too politically motivated. Unlike people on the left who are not, they are politically motivated, but they're trustworthy. It's like their political motivations couldn't possibly lead them to, I don't know, lie about basically every hate crime hoax that has happened in the past 2 years. They would never do that. No, it makes perfect sense to believe them, despite DNA evidence, despite their property being used in the commission of a crime, all that. We can believe that side, despite their political motivations. We can't believe the right. So that's different. That's different from what we saw with the Gamergate case. I mean, the Gamergate episode was maligning individuals in the real world, although from what I've gathered, it's much less specific. It's not like you watch that episode and you're like, oh, that's Internet Aristocrat, and oh, that's Sargon of Akkad, or oh, that's like Mundane Matt, or whoever. You watch this episode and everyone watches it and they're like, damn, that's Ann Coulter, right? Or damn, that's Millie Weaver. Or if you're someone who knows me, apparently, damn, that's Katrina. So that's a bit more on the nose. It's a bit more specific. And then, like I said, within the context of that universe, even if all this stuff is true, that's not how you do justice, right? We have, on the one hand, physical evidence, including DNA. And on the other hand, we have this completely circumstantial evidence, basically this story that was like made up by the investigators, based very like, somewhat plausible explanation. But the kind of plausible explanation that will always exist with every crime. And then just throw our hands up and say, justice can't be served in this case because we can't trust people on the political right. So, go ahead, Antifa, beat Ann Coulter half to death, rape her when she's unconscious, do whatever, honestly, do anything you want. We'll just find, someone on her side to scapegoat and use that as an excuse not to pursue justice. That's bottom line. That's the message of this episode. So that's pretty sick. I mean, a lot of people are talking about like, oh, this rape fantasy of Ann Coulter, and it's pretty sick that happened. I think people would actually like the episode if that happened to her and then it was treated seriously, right? And Antifa was like proven to have done it and was held to account and all of that. I think that would probably in most people's minds justify portraying the rape of Ann Coulter. It wouldn't be shown as some kind of sick fantasy. So the fact that that's part of the plot is, I mean, it's goofy. I think, I find it a little cringy. Not saying that I would put that kind of thing past Antifa. I mean, if they really are training with ISIS, that's certainly got to be part of their repertoire at some point, but there are good ways, I think, from that type of escalation. But yeah, if the point of that was to point out how evil the alt left is, then that would make a certain amount of sense, right? Or, something, if it was done in a way to actually show how you might pursue justice. But instead, they were trying to say basically that, well, justice becomes impossible because of the information war that's going on between the left and the right, and we just can't trust what anyone says. But they don't mean they can't trust what anyone says, because they're implicitly trusting the Antifa guy when he says that he didn't rape her, and implicitly distrusting the guy on the right when he says he didn't rape her. Another aspect that I found disturbing is there's a weird attempt to invert Whedon's law in this. So Whedon's law is basically, the rule that if a guy is a male feminist, then he's a creep. Right? And in many cases, actually a rapist. And we have quite a few of those documented at this point. The more a guy tries to suck up to women via feminism and obsequiousness, the more likely it is that we're seeing that pathological beta strategy play out that I've talked about before. So in this episode, the Antifa guy actually turns out they're almost saying he's not politically motivated, that the real reason he was there and rioting was to try and meet chicks. So he's there for a sexual purpose. But somehow that makes it, rather unbelievable that he would have perpetrated this rape, right? Because he wasn't there to have sex with Martha. He was there to have sex with, I don't know, Goldilocks or something. I can't imagine what he was thinking. But then on the flip side, right, so then you have the identitarian guy who is also interested in finding a sexual partner, in this case in Martha, and that is predatory and evil, because it's a guy on the right doing it. Right? Because that's how this generally plays out. That's what we've seen happen over and over and over again recently. It's totally all of those right-leaning guys where story after story after story is coming out, where their ex-wives are writing books about how they were gaslit for, over a decade, while pro-feminist, outspoken, semi-famous guy goes along banging actresses who are desperate to climb the ladder and whatnot. That's how that plays out in the world. So there's an interesting sort of double way that they're trying to cover for the left in this episode. And then the question is this going to have any kind of effect? And I really don't know. I assume the audience has shrunk for this show. I probably should have actually looked that up before talking about it. But at the same time, I know from unfortunate experience, arguing with people on the internet, that an awful lot of people get their understanding of the law, and sometimes a lot more than just the law, from watching Law and Order. So that aspect's a little bit concerning. On the other hand, like I said on Gavin McInnes's show recently, the left keeps overplaying their hand. They overplayed their hand pretty much all through 2017, and I think they're overplaying their hand now with this episode. It also shows how emboldened the alt-left has been and still is, and how much institutional control they have, or at least how much they fantasize that they have. And I think, they probably have less than they imagine, especially right now, but they certainly have quite a bit, and probably quite a bit more than the average person on the right recognizes or is prepared to deal with. I guess the moral of the story is it, kind of comes back to, I'm glad that I'm doing this. I'm glad that I'm pursuing the lawsuit. I'm glad I'm speaking out. I'm glad I have this channel, because these people are crazy and they will literally kill you.